Hello, my name is Justin Spencer Young, and my intention in this video is to talk you through the 3-day masterclass on value creation and valuation. So as I talk to you, behind the camera is my teaching plan laid out in an Excel spreadsheet of what I intend to cover and the order and how those sessions will work over a 3-day teaching period. So generally the day kicks off at 8:30 in the morning and we run through until 4:30 in the afternoon, and it consists of 4 blocks. So the first block, the morning session, goes from 8:30 until 10 o'clock. We then have a tea break, and we have the second morning session that goes from 10:30 up until lunchtime at around about 12 o'clock. We break for lunch for an hour, then we come back for the first afternoon session, which runs from 1 until 2:30. And then we have an afternoon break, and the last session of the day runs from 3 o'clock until 4:30. The intention is that there are enough breaks during the day and that the sessions have about an hour and a half, which we might further break up into exercises, comfort breaks, a walk around the garden just to clear our minds, and who knows what else we need as we go on our learning journey. So the intention around this masterclass is to cover value creation and valuation. Now, what underlies that is a lot of different avenues that we can go along. But having taught this for many years, I've got a path that I've worn quite well, that I've worked out that works effectively and is suitable for 3 days. So part of our challenge is to be careful not to pack in too much theory, which can be a little bit like drinking from a fire hydrant. So if you can picture that, this fire hydrant spraying in your face of so much information, you just get a little bit that you retain and remember, and then you don't really digest and use the information. Okay, so that's always the challenge that we face in a course like this. The other challenge that's going to be common in this course is that there's a diverse set of skills in the delegates. So at one end, you're going to have chartered accountants who understand the financial dynamics very clearly. You might even have some folks who are professionals in capital budgeting and decision making. But at the other end of the extreme, you're likely to have some folks who come from perhaps the non-financial sector of the business, and they might be HR professionals or marketing or operations professionals, and they're not familiar with the financial dynamics. So we've got to find this balance. All right, so now that I've laid the kind of given you the lay of the land of the challenges that we face, let me dive into day one. So we're going to kick off the morning session with what I call an icebreaker case study. All right, so this is an opportunity for me to get to know my audience and to see how you work together in teams, get a sense of who are the ones who are top star finance people, so I can identify who they are in the class, and those who are going to need some help and support because they don't come from finance. We do a case study called Southwestern Conquistador Beer, which is really great fun, working in teams, a bit of team dynamics, and test the skills in the classroom. And that takes us up to tea break on the first day, and hopefully by then people are a little bit more chilled and relaxed. Okay, we're in the classroom, we're having some fun, we're learning some stuff, and we're actually getting to know each other and hopefully build a little bit of trust with each other on our journey. We'll come back after tea, and then we're going to dive into the theory. We're going to talk about accounting perspective of a business and a business perspective. Now, those are quite different. It's income statement, balance sheet basics, but it's a very non-accounting session. So this is where some of the accountants start to get a little bit uncomfortable because they don't like my perspective. But what happens is those folks who are non-accountants kind of see the world and understand it better. And when I mean the world according to accountants and financial performance. Okay, so that's income statements, balance sheets, and that sort of thing. We go and break for lunch, and we come back after lunch, and now we start to talk about the business context for value creation. What is the definition of value creation? What are our sources of capital? What do banks or debt providers expect from us? What do equity providers expect? We then get to talk return on net assets, return on equity, and build some performance dashboards so that we can use some tools to measure value creation. And then that sets us up for the last session on day one, where we now take a dive into the data. I have a data set of listed companies that are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where I have their income statement and balance sheet data, in some cases going back, 50 years. But we're going to look back just over the last 5, sometimes 10 years of some well-known companies listed on the JSE. And I'll give you guys in the audience an opportunity to select who you want to look at. And we will see who are the value creators. How do we measure it? How can we look at their performance dashboard and see who's destroying value and who's creating value? So that will conclude the first day. And that is quite a lot of material to get through in one day. It's from a standing start all the way through to dashboards on value creation. All right, let's move on to the day 2. We're going to kick off in the morning talking about economic value add, or the world of EVA. I'm going to show you how EVA and DuPont analysis, which the accountants will be familiar with, and we would have covered a little bit the day before, how they are different and at the same time very similar. And we'll do some practical examples of calculating EVA. So we'll get out the theory, we'll get some data, we'll calculate some EVA for a specific company that we will identify ahead of time. So that will be the morning session. We'll come back after tea and we're going to talk about risk and cost of capital. So a discussion about how does risk show up in the business? What are the dynamics that drive more risk, or how do we reduce risk? And then the details of weighted average cost of capital, because ultimately that is a measure of risk in a business. So we'll do the WACC calculations. We'll understand the different levers that drive WACC, and that will give us opportunity to dive into this thing called the capital asset pricing model and how it gets used, its strengths and its weaknesses, and maybe some alternatives that we can use when talking about the cost of capital in a business. After lunch, we get into cash flow. And here we're talking the difference between profit and cash flow. We're talking about free cash flow calculations and how working capital dynamics and growth impact cash flow. And if we have time in this session, and depending on the capability of the audience, we might even get into sustainable growth rates and actual growth rates and how we measure these and how they tell us what our capital needs will be for a business going forward. I really enjoy that work. That's good fun. But it does require a certain, maturity in financial understanding to get into that. So we will see how we go on that. The last session of day 2 is NPVs and valuation. And here we start talking the theory of what is an NPV calculation? How do we do it? And what's the difference between an NPV and a valuation? And that leads us into a discussion around discounting future cash flows, as well as terminal value calculations and how far into the future we look when doing NPVs and valuations. And that will conclude day 2. Day 3 is very much a practical exercise type of day. So I have a case study that I've used for many years that helps us bring together all this theory and start applying the dynamics and processes of valuation. I call it Che Guevara valuation case study. It's very much a canned case study. So this is not valuing a listed company. We're not in that space yet, and I don't think the delegates will be ready for that. This is a case study that says, here's some financial data. Let's forecast the income statement and balance sheet for the next 5 years ahead. Let's calculate the free cash flows. Let's calculate the terminal value and discount these cash flows and do a valuation and understand, doing Excel and putting into practice what we've learned, how we value a business. That then gives us the opportunity to do some sensitivity analysis, to then look back and say, what are the levers that we go and pull here that drive the value up or down, and what are the dynamics that impact the valuation? So if you have that overall perspective of value and you know what levers to pull, then the detail doesn't matter so much. You can leave the detail to others, because really management's role here is from a high level perspective to say, well, how do I impact those areas of the business that are going to create more value or drive more value? And that leads us into a discussion, group discussions around valuation sensitivity and the philosophy of valuation. And the reason why this conversation is important, because it forms the basis of how we take what we learn back to the workspace and apply our learnings in how we manage our businesses. All right. The last session on day 3 is an opportunity to set up a case study stroke assignment so that the delegates can take away with them an exercise where they go and have a go at doing the work on their own, or at least in syndicates, and doing a valuation for themselves and applying what they learned. So I call that the continued learning discussion. How do we take what we've learned and go back to the workspace, work in groups where we are distracted and have the world coming up at us and getting in our way of doing some of these exercises, but then being able to come together as a group, do the work, and present at some stage an assignment around valuing a company. So that is actually a lot of material to cover in 3 days. And we might say, well, can we weave in some specific things along the way, determining how we, or depending on how we go? And I'm more than happy to do that if there are very specific issues that you might want to cover. But I hope that gives you a good overview of what we will do in 3 days of value creation and valuation. I get excited by this work. I really enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to being with you guys in the classroom and learning and teaching all about value creation. We'll see you in the classroom.